Republicans and MAGA influencers are increasingly feeling divided from their own party and from the Trump administration over all of the revelations in the Epstein files. These influencers and elected officials have called out the administration's refusal to dig deeper into the shocking allegations within them. It's a sign of a greater schism forming within the party that could affect their performance down the line. Shawn Ryan is a MAGA affiliated conservative podcaster who has more than 1.2 million followers on X alone. But over the past few weeks, he's started to turn on Trump and some members of his party. This week, he uploaded this rant expressing his frustration with what hasn't been done with regards to the Epstein files.
I've been pretty quiet about Pam Bondi in front of Congress the other day, talking about how the Dow's up to 50,000. Nobody gives a fuck. Because what you should be talking about is how you are going to investigate and prosecute any pedophiles that were running around on Epstein Island that you're affiliated with. But we didn't talk about that, did we? Oh, and what's the excuse? What was the excuse? Oh, if we prosecute everybody, the whole system would go down. Well, you know what that sounds like? You know what that sounds like? That sounds like how Trump ran his campaign. Let's drain the swamp. Doesn't that sound a lot like draining the swamp? It actually is drain the swamp served up to you on a fucking silver platter. But you're not going to take it, are you? You're going to protect pedophiles. You're going to protect pedophiles rather than go after them and hope that everybody's happy that the Dow hit 50,000. Are you fucking out of your mind? I guess the whole drain the swamp campaign promise was another fucking bullshit lie, huh? Man, the lies are stacking up fast. I've never seen so many fucking lies appear in what, a year? It's only been a fucking year. Look at all the fucking lies. You know, I wanted to talk to you about something else too. Then you got Pam Bondi and what's that other guy's name? Todd Blanche. Yeah, running around giving Ro Khanna and Massey all this shit because they accidentally put two names that are apparently innocent, out that were in the Epstein files. Well, I got fucking news for you. You know, you have two guys that are in Congress that are actually doing shit, and you give them shit because they made a mistake when they're trying to do the fucking job of the entire Department of Justice, because nobody over there will do their fucking job when it comes to putting pedophiles away in prison. So you give them shit because two people are trying to do the job of the entire Department of Justice. Fuck you. Fuck you. And here's another thing I'm getting tired of is seeing all these fucking politicians, congressmen, senators, fucking talking about all the shit that they saw in the unredacted files. And then you know what they do? They go right to X and they post about it and tell us all how shocked we would be of what's in those fucking files. Guess what, congressmen? Guess what, senators? There's the speech and debate clause that says you cannot be sued for anything you say on the House floor. So here's a tip. Get to fucking work. Permission granted. Oh, and one last thing. One last thing. I saw this shit pop up the other day. Obama goes on some random podcast that nobody's ever heard of and just happens to drop, oh, aliens are real. Yeah. Tell me that shit's not fucking orchestrated. Right in the middle of the biggest pedophile ring exposed in the fucking world. All of a sudden, we're gonna drop that aliens are real. Fuck you, motherfucker. Fuck you. Fucking aliens. Fuck off.
So, this video clearly resonated with Shawn Ryan's audience and other viewers. It has over 2.1 million views as of now, according to the metrics on X. And in the comment section, there's some divisiveness coming from people closer to the left who may be agreeing with Shawn Ryan. And then you have some people on the right who are criticizing him for continuing to talk about this because it looks bad for Trump. And they're calling him out for hypocrisy since he supposedly didn't talk about this during Biden's administration. My guess is that influencers like Shawn Ryan are very aware of the fact that they need to go where their audience is going. This sort of pivot or focus on the Epstein files may reflect how he authentically feels about sex crimes, but it also might have something to do with the fact that audiences everywhere are outraged over this political scandal, whether they're on the right or the left. And this isn't to say that Shawn Ryan is 100% correct here or that he's a reliable source, because he's not. Even in this video, he talks about this quote allegedly from Pam Bondi that if they were to expose everyone in the Epstein files, it would crash the entire government. But this isn't actually a real quote. It's a viral rumor that has been proven false by fact checkers. According to Snopes, as of this week, Pam Bondi never said anything of the sort. The claim that is going around on social media is that she said, if we prosecute everyone in the Epstein files, the whole system collapses. But it's fabricated. And when I took a quick glance through other things that Shawn Ryan has been posting recently, you can see that he's not exactly trustworthy. He's deflecting from a lot of the issues going on in the United States right now through this very conservative partisan lens that is often founded on other made up stuff. For example, he's claiming that 18,000 known and suspected terrorists were let into the country during the Biden administration. And even again, in his comment section down here, you have other conservatives saying things like, that is our biggest threat, not the Epstein files. So if he's pointing fingers at who's distracting from the files, he should also be looking in the mirror. And in addition to that, he just traffics in a lot of disinformation about a variety of topics. He quote tweeted this post that is supposedly about MIT research into Alzheimer's, but this post already has a community note fact checking it. Shawn Ryan also frequently appears to share unverified medical misinformation or disinformation, including stuff about fake cancer cures that's been propagated on other social media platforms like Joe Rogan and by RFK Jr. And I found this post really interesting because he's basically quote tweeting Russian propaganda, which he apparently does semi-frequently. And it's blaming the Epstein files and what's in them on the pure Satanism of Western elites. And here is Shawn Ryan saying, yep. Now, what's in the Epstein files isn't because of Satanism. It's because of systemic sexual abuse that has been enabled and tolerated for far too long. But if you were to actually start going down that rabbit hole, Shawn Ryan may find that it conflicts with some of his other preconceived opinions and beliefs. At the end of the day, these MAGA influencers can't be trusted just because they happen to say the right thing every once in a while. The reality is they're following where the wind is blowing, and that's what they're good at the end of the day, is building a huge audience, not being truthful or fact-checking or being a reliable source of information. And this is a really interesting phenomenon that's happening across the whole MAGA sphere right now, where a lot of original true believers who supported Donald Trump no matter what are now having this sort of personal reckoning over the Epstein files scandal. One of those people is former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. On a conservative podcast over the weekend, Marjorie Taylor Greene talked about how much pressure there was from Trump himself to back down from revealing the Epstein files. She talked about the 4 Republicans who were in favor of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, including herself, Thomas Massie, Lauren Boebert, and Nancy Mace. And she said there was tons of pressure coming from the White House to get them to stop voting in favor of releasing the Epstein files. But for someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been linked to QAnon and other conspiracies about Epstein and powerful elites in the past, this is the logical conclusion of her specific belief system. She said, we're like, why? We're talking about the Epstein files. This is the ultimate promise. This is the ultimate way to provide transparency. This is the ultimate way to take it to the deep state and expose a whole criminal cabal of rich, powerful elites that I believe control everything. And guess what? Come to find out, they do. So in the meantime, she continued, President Trump is calling it, the whole thing, a hoax. He's calling it a Democrat hoax. He won't have anything to do with the women. He still refuses to have anything to do with these women. So the whole thing is building. And then she said, one day I get a phone call from the president in September, and he is so mad at me, and he's yelling at me, and he's angry at me. And he's like, "You're supporting Rand Paul Jr.," a reference to Thomas Massie. "And he's chewing me out for signing my name on Thomas Massie's discharge petition to release the Epstein files. And I'm trying to tell him, Mr. President, they say you did nothing wrong. This needs to come out." And so we're having this argument, and he tells me on the phone call, he's like, "Marjorie, my friends will get hurt." And then she later adds, "Every single person is on this freaking list. They're all there. Every billionaire, heads of state, Larry Summers, Peter Thiel, they're all in there." So what's so interesting about this path to realization is that the original conspiracy intent behind revealing the Epstein files was this idea that it would exonerate Trump, who was fighting on behalf of children and safety everywhere. But the reality is actually the opposite of that. Trump isn't exonerated in the Epstein files, he's implicated. And like he told Marjorie Taylor Greene over the phone, so are all of his friends. So now we've reached this point of cognitive dissonance with a lot of these Republicans and MAGA influencers where they're getting what they wanted, but it's not showing them what they believed to be true. And despite that, they still have yet to fully realize that Trump was never on the side of truth or justice or safety or women or children or fairness. They still can't quite wrap their heads around just how corrupt Trump really is or how deeply embedded he is in these files. Because to make that realization would show that their entire worldview that they've constructed over all of these years is false. It's rooted in things that aren't real. So instead, we have this schism forming within the MAGA base and the Republican Party at large. And interestingly enough, more and more people are starting to be galvanized by these Epstein files in a direction that might not end up being favorable to Trump and his administration. And the investigations led by Congress into the Epstein files are continuing. Bill and Hillary Clinton are set to be deposed, and so is Les Wexner, a billionaire who was extremely close with Epstein. He was one of Epstein's most prominent clients, and although he disavows his relationship with Epstein and claims no wrongdoing, several of the Epstein survivors have linked Les Wexner, this billionaire, to the exact crimes that Epstein committed. Les Wexner is perhaps best known in the Columbus, Ohio area because his name is plastered across hospitals, buildings, school facilities, and all types of places. He was the founder of L Brands, which most famously included Victoria's Secret, but also Bath and Body Works, White Barn, and I think at one point Justice, the brand for young girls. And while Congress in the US is struggling just to get these people named in the Epstein files to answer questions publicly, over in other countries, prosecutors are actually preparing to do their jobs. Over in France, prosecutors have opened probes into human trafficking and tax fraud allegations against prominent French citizens who were named in the Epstein files. One Paris prosecutor said that these investigations will rely on the publicly available material in these files, as well as complaints filed by child protection groups. And these French prosecutors are hoping that more victims will come forward in light of these revelations. One person associated with one of these campaigning groups said France has a key role in the matter as it is the only country outside the United States where Epstein owned property. He apparently had a luxury apartment nearby the Arc de Triomphe. And according to Reuters, authorities have already opened a preliminary probe into France's former culture minister Jack Lang and his daughter Caroline on suspicion of tax fraud. Meanwhile, they are also examining 3 other cases, including that a French diplomat may have transferred United Nations documents to Epstein. He's denied those allegations. Previously, in 2019, when Epstein was arrested in New York City on charges of sex trafficking, French prosecutors opened an investigation into his longtime associate, Jean-Luc Brunel. But Brunel died in a French prison in 2023, so they closed the case. And although France has these specific ties to the Epstein investigation, this is also a global operation. On Tuesday, a UN Human Rights Council panel of independent experts suggested the existence of a, quote, global criminal enterprise tied to Epstein's network. So the Epstein case is much bigger than just the United States, but over in the United States, Congresspeople are facing immense barriers to seeking justice for these victims. One sort of unlikely character who's pushing forward the Epstein investigation in the US is this Republican representative from Kentucky, Tom Thomas Massie. He sat down for an interview with Politico, and some of what he said is very interesting. Crucially, Politico asked Massie about Trump's ability to hold Republicans in line when it comes to not just the Epstein files, but his unpopular policies in general. And what Massie said is, quietly and privately, people are telling me they agree with me. And so there are people who plan on running again who will be past their primaries or certainly past the date at which the administration could put another Navy SEAL up to run against somebody. So what Massie said is, the margin is razor thin. So on any given day, I would just need one or two of my own co-conspirators to get something done. And what's happening is that the retirement caucus is growing and primary days are coming up and passing. Once we get past March, April, and May, which contain a large portion of their Republican primaries, I think you're going to see more defections because quietly and privately, people are telling me they agree with me. Politico also asked Massie why he thinks that there's so much traction around the Epstein files in Europe compared to the US. And Massie said, I think the way that politics is structured in Europe is more ephemeral and reputational. They can recall a prime minister. They can have a vote of confidence. I think their head's always on the chopping block. And so if reputationally somebody becomes a burden to the party, they might be quicker to jettison that person. And with the case of Prince Andrew, it's all about reputation with royalty, right? They're supposed to be better than everybody else. And when they aren't, they can't be in the club. Here in the United States, once you become the ruling party in the White House, you're there for 4 years. It's almost unheard of that you would switch horses in the middle of the stream in the United States like they do in Europe. And also because we don't have a coalition in our version of parliament. The president right now uses Congress as a rubber stamp, and he doesn't have to really worry about the coalition falling apart in parliament. He doesn't have to worry about members of his own party defecting. So I think they're going to just keep taking on water here. If reputations mattered more in the United States, Howard Lutnick would already have resigned. Howard Lutnick is the Secretary of Commerce who's mentioned numerous times in the Epstein files. And when it comes to the White House's reaction to that, they've basically just shrugged it off. Now, finally, the thing that I found most interesting of all in this interview is when Politico asked Massie, how do you feel the Epstein matter is playing in your primary? How do you feel like this is shaping your race at this point? And he said, well, there are a lot of factors that play back home. You've got to understand, you can't pretend that things in DC are the same as they are in Kentucky's 4th District. When I undertook this cause to get this bill passed, I didn't think it would hurt me back home, and I didn't think it would help me back home. You know, I've taken up for raw milk and ending the Federal Reserve. Those are causes that maybe they're nationally popular, but back home, maybe they only motivate a low single-digit % of my voters, right? And I thought the Epstein case might be similar to that, a national concern that doesn't have a lot of effect or a disproportionate amount of influence in my district. But I was surprised to find out that it does. This isn't a boutique or niche issue back home. This is a big deal back home, and it's also shaped the demographics of my support back home. The people who were upset that my entire family posed with machine guns are now voting for me, and the president has control over the people who get 100% of their news from Fox. So I've lost support there, but I've gained support from Republican soccer moms. And this is reflected in the latest polling that shows Americans believe the Epstein files show the powerful gets a pass. This new Reuters Ipsos poll found that after the latest release of Epstein files, 69% of respondents said their views were captured very well or extremely well by the statement that the Epstein files show that powerful people in the US are rarely held accountable for their actions. So what this all goes to show is that the Epstein files and the revelations within are a big deal across the entire political spectrum. And it's a conduit for this feeling that powerful people are rarely, if ever, held accountable, even for heinous crimes that are playing out publicly. This is definitely hurting Donald Trump. And it may hurt the Republican Party as a whole, which is why I think we're seeing more and more Republicans like Massie, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and even these pro-MAGA influencers defect from the party line to talk about how outrageous and egregious the Epstein files scandal really is. Now, again, I don't think that this means you can trust these Republicans or that these Republicans are credible or smart or that they share information that's true or factual all of the time. Because the reality is they're all continuing to needlessly hate against members of the opposition party. And at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have to trust them, like them, or agree with them. But at the end of the day, this shows this overall shift against Trump, against the Republican Party, against really elites in general. And that is a fascinating opening, potentially for some really progressive politics to come in and replace them. Because I think that this schism in the Republican Party and among the MAGA base ultimately weakens their party. It's for a good reason, but my hope is that it pushes more people to consider that a lot of what they've believed for the past 10 years might actually be wrong, and that there are better options, even if they're not technically on your side of the aisle.